As many of you know, probably all of you, those are the Beatitudes that begins the Sermon on the Mount. And there are lots of people that will tell you if you could follow just the Beatitudes, or some people say if you could follow the Sermon on the Mount, you would be, you'd be a saint because you would have followed all the teachings of Jesus. They would suggest that they're all summarized in the Sermon on the Mount, and some would suggest that all the Sermon on the Mount is summarized in what you just heard there. I think, though, if there's an issue with it, though, for many of us, that we've heard it so often, and it's beautiful and it's poetic, but do you ever stop and consider it? What does it mean to do those things? So I thought I might share with you how that played out for some of the saints. Many of you know that on Mondays and Thursday mornings, I do a little thing at 9 o'clock on Facebook. We call it Morning Devotions, and I just take a saint of the day and we talk about it just for a little bit, just find one small little thing about their story. And I typically pick unknown saints, not something that everybody would know. And so this is for all the saints, if I may use the first hymn we sang. These are the notes for all these saints that I've done over the last 2.5 years. And I just took some time, just went through them, thought maybe these might be helpful to you. Take Blessed are the poor in spirit. Luke translates that, blessed are the poor. And how's that play out for you and I? None of us really want to be poor. But, there are times when the good Lord calls us to do more giving than we might normally do. Here's 3 examples. St. Leo of Cava, he was a Benedictine monk in 1050. He was known for his care and charity to the poor, often by going off into the woods to collect firewood for them. St. Roche was a French nobleman born into that, and he developed early on in his life a great sympathy for the poor and the sick. At age 20, he was orphaned, and that meant that the title and everything that came with his noble title came to him. He gave every last bit of it away to the poor. Or St. Robert Bellarmine, I like this. It says he lived in this austere life in Rome, giving most of his money to the poor. At one point, he used the tapestries in his living quarters that, hung on the walls to clothe the poor, saying, well, the walls will not catch cold. And I read something like that and I think to myself, well, that's a really good point. When there is a need, whether that's Hurricane Ian or anything else for that matter, there's some need that I become aware of. Is there something that I don't actually need that would be better used by someone else? Something to consider. And then the blessed are the peacemakers. This one really caught my eye. This beatitude, as I was thinking about this the last couple of days, mostly just because it dawned on me, you and I, we don't see too many peacemakers in our day. I was trying to think back just on the news over the last couple of weeks. Have I seen anybody who is doing anything that would be called peacemaking? And I don't know about you, maybe it's just what I watch, but the answer was no. Quite the opposite, I'm listening to a whole lot of people that very much don't want to make peace. They really want to divide because they're trying to convince me to cast a vote or do whatever they want me to do. And so it was encouraging me to go back through this list, and I just pulled out some of these peacemakers. So blessed Tommaso, when Lutheranism began to make inroads, this was during the time of the Reformation, Tommaso spoke and wrote in defense of the church. He did not confront. He did not preach, fire and brimstone. He simply spoke of his love for Christ and the church he founded, and it was persuasive. St. Raymond of Barbastro, he was, a monk in Spain in the 1100s, and he was exiled by force out of his diocese for preaching against the use of Christian armies against the foes of Christianity. St. Maria Cope, she was the superior at St. Joseph's Hospital in Syracuse, New York in the 1870s. The hospital cared for the sick regardless of race or religion, which was, as you may know, a rarity in that day. St. Narcissus of Jerusalem, this is around 180. He's the bishop of Jerusalem late in his life. He was accused of a crime. None of the Christians believed that he was guilty of this, but Narcissus did not believe he should serve while being under such a cloud, and he left to be a desert hermit. After he'd been acquitted later, he returned, and I like this. When he returned to his diocese, it said he was older, weathered, but stronger and more zealous than ever. Similarly, Blessed Juan in the late 1800s founded the Congregation of the Sisters of the Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Mercy. And they were going to work with the poor. And the congregation spread throughout Spain. It was very successful. However, a scandal developed when some of the sisters accused Juan of some impropriety. And so he was ordered away from the congregation. And through the following years, he always simply obeyed the will of his superiors and never said anything. Even after he was cleared of the false allegations, he voluntarily stayed away from the congregation because he did not want to cause dissension, disunity in the group. And St. Benedict the Black, this is in the early days of Christianity. His parents had been slaves brought from Africa to Sicily, so he was born into slavery, but he got his freedom and continued to work for his former master. But in that role, it says he was scorned and mocked by others due to his origin and his skin. And he retained a natural cheerfulness. I find this inspiring. Basically, what it tells me is it can be done. In other words, you can be a peacemaker. You can do something about your resources. It just inspires me to read these stories because, when I watch the news or read the news or, talk to people, that kind of stuff, sometimes I don't run into any good examples. And so, I don't know how to handle things, because if all you see is one kind of way to deal with something, what do? Of course, you do that. That's why the saints matter to us. It's also why it is so important for the adults in here, for you and I, to do our utmost best to live this stuff out for the kids. Because they're suffering from the same thing. If they don't see a peacemaker, well, how are they ever going to be a peacemaker? They won't be able to do it. And if they see the adults, if they see us, work more towards division than to peace, well, how will they know to do anything else? I was with the students at Tampa Catholic this morning, 750 teenagers and with their grandparents. And that's what the thing is, I'm standing out looking at them. That was the thing that got me. It was like the teens, I can explain some of this to them. They'll get it to an extent. But where they'll really get it is if they turn to their grandparents and they see peacemakers. Then they'll get it. And then they'll grow up to be peacemakers. And isn't that what we want? So if I could encourage you, the Beatitudes are not some high, lofty thing that, only the saints can do. I think you and I can do them. I think you and I can do them pretty well. I think we just have to put some effort into it. And the reward not only, as the Beatitudes say, the reward of heaven, but the reward is even better than that, perhaps, because the reward is we pass that on to the kids. We pass that on. We pass that faith along. And that would be an amazing thing, an amazing legacy for us all.